All right, so we're going to go over that Amoeba Sisters worksheet, and the first thing I wanted you guys to pay attention to is that you're not reading your directions. Item number 1 on the Amoeba Sisters, this is the food webs, energy pyramids, and introduction to biodiversity, is on, for number 1, you had to show a food chain, and on the diagram we had grass, followed by a cricket, followed by a frog, and then a snake. Thanks, snake. And you're supposed to draw your lines here showing the feeding relationships. And these arrows here, as we just stated a second ago, represent the flow of energy from one organism to the next. And the direction that the arrow is pointing is important because the arrow points not only to show the feeding relationship of who eats who, but also to show the direction of the energy flow. The next thing was for number 2, you should have circled autotroph and producer. And for number 3, we circled heterotroph and secondary consumers. So make sure you're comfortable with that vocabulary. For the next question, number 4, it says to arrange all the organisms for the food chain into an energy pyramid. And so you guys have already had some experience labeling an energy pyramid. You start out basically with your triangle. And then we had to have the following levels labeled. So we divided it up like this. Is this what you did?
Yes.
And what did you put down in the bottom?
Producers.
Okay, producers. And then it said there you have to label first trophic level, second trophic level, third trophic level, fourth trophic level. So the producers are which trophic level?
First.
Okay, so first level. And is it okay if I use TL from now on to abbreviate it?
Yeah.
Okay, what's our next trophic level?
Primary consumers.
Okay, so are we okay if I do primary like that? And so this would be the second trophic level. Moving up, what do we have next?
Secondary consumers.
Secondary consumers. And which trophic level is that?
The third.
And then up here we have tertiary consumers. And this is the fourth trophic level. Okay, now, what else are you supposed to put? It says you're supposed to draw in with the organisms inside. So you would have shown down here on the bottom maybe some of the plants, right? So grasses. And then at this next level, you'd have your cricket, and I can't draw a cricket as cute as their cricket. And then that one's like disjointed, isn't it? And the next one was the frog. There. And then lastly, the snake up at the top. And what else were you supposed to put on that? Ah, the energy flow. So for the energy flow, what do you start out with? How much energy do you start out with? 25,000. So how much energy goes from one level to the next? 10%. Okay, and right, you're mentioning 90% is given off as heat. Move back to your seat. Pay attention up here. Check your paper, make sure you got it right. You got it right? Okay. So, what's 10% of 25,000? Here's the decimal, okay?
2,500.
You just move your decimal over to the left one spot, and you've got 2,500. It's just that easy. Okay? From this level to this much, how much is transferred over?
250.
Only 10% again, and it's not 10% of the original, it's 10% of this much, because at this level, there's only 2,500 available. So now we go down to 250. And then from this level to this level, it's now, we're all down to 25. Okay? And they're not giving you, oh, they're giving you units, kilocalories. a certain amount of energy. Okay? And remember, calories are used as it's a measurement of energy that the cell uses to do work. So now I'm going to talk about things that you weren't asked to draw on this chart. Okay? As we look at this, why is it shaped? Why does it have this shape of a triangle? Okay, so I like when you guys raise hands so that I can hear you. So raise your hand and I'll call on you. No? Yeah. Okay. What now? Why does it take that shape?
Because the top of the pyramid is where you get the least amount of energy, and then the bottom is where you get the most.
Okay. So as we talk about going up, what happens to the amount of energy available? It decreases. So we're going to say that the energy decreases. Okay. So there are other types of ecological pyramids. There's another ecological pyramid called a pyramid of numbers. And that refers to the numbers of organisms in an ecosystem. So what do you think would happen to the numbers of organisms in a pyramid of numbers? As you go up the pyramid, what would happen to your numbers of organisms? It would increase? Decrease. So, okay, so as you go up, look at the shape of the pyramid. If I tell you it's a pyramid of numbers, if your energy decreases, well, think about it. If you don't have as much energy available at this level here, what are the tertiary consumers eating? They're eating the secondary consumers and maybe other things down below as well. So if there are not as many, you can't support as many tertiary consumers. As you go up, you need a lot of producers to feed more or less consumers. Less. Look at the shape of the pyramid. It's shaped like that for a reason. There's less energy available as you go up. Less energy means that you can support less organisms. Okay? There's less energy available. Okay, let's look at this again. You have a field of grass. The field can support a certain number of insects. Can it support the exact same number of birds? No. It's fewer birds. And if the snakes eat the birds, it supports fewer snakes. And so, what happens to the numbers of organisms as you go up the pyramid? It what? Decreases. So that's our pyramid of numbers, Nathan. The pyramid of numbers, as you go up the pyramid of numbers, your number of organisms decrease. You always have to have more producers because less energy gets transferred to each level. Less energy means it can't support as many organisms. Now I'm going to introduce you to another word, biomass. What do you think that word means? Somebody raise your hand. What does the word biomass mean? It means what it sounds like, yeah. Actual mass of what? The what mass? Natural mass. What do you mean by natural mass?
Land, water, air, atmosphere.
Okay, well, what does bio mean? Life. So it's the mass of water? Is water alive? No. So the mass of living things. So the mass of living things. As you go up a biomass pyramid, what do you think happens to the biomass? It decreases. The biomass, the amount of living material, decreases. So if you were to pull out every single plant in that field and figured out the mass of all of the plants in the field, there would be more mass in plant material than there ever would be in insects. If you weighed every single insect. If you took every single bird that fed on the insects. There'd be far less mass of birds because it all comes back to what factor? What gets transferred as you go up? Energy. There's less energy available as you move up the pyramid, so it can support less life. And you see that in less numbers of organisms, as well as less mass, less energy, okay? So that's not really shown here, but you need to understand that was in 3-1, okay? Number 6, a fungus is an organism not drawn in the above food chain. So getting back to our food chain here, where we started out with the grass, and I'll write it again, the cricket, the frog, and the snake. And we already established that this was our food chain. It says decomposers are not shown here, but they have a very important role. What's the role of fungi and bacteria? What do they do? What does that mean, decompose? Break them down. What happens when you break something down? What happens to it? Somebody raise your hand. What happens to it? Adria? It dissolves. Okay. What does decompose mean? What happens to all the stuff that's in the snake when it dies? Why does it rot? Because of the decomposers. So who's getting the energy from the snake's matter? So where would they be? Would they have an arrow here?
Yes.
Yeah. So so I draw the arrow from the snake.
Draw the arrow for everything.
The snake goes to everything?
No, draw the arrow.
Oh, everything goes back. Okay, good. So everything when it dies, it gets broken down by, and we said that in every step of the way, only 10% of the energy is lost, right? Here we get 10%. It should actually go, those arrows are not good. Let me see. If I go here, there's only 10% transferred. And here, 10% transferred. Here, 10% transferred. How much would you expect to be transferred from the snake to the bacteria? 10%. Why would it be any different? Only 10% of the energy. But the bacteria and the fungus, there's millions and, oh God, billions, trillions of these little microscopic organisms in the soil. And they're breaking down organisms. But what do they do? I mean, they're important because they're breaking stuff down, and we don't want to be wading through a bunch of dead stuff all around us. So that part's important, but ultimately, why is it so important that they're breaking this stuff down?
They keep the cycle going.
They keep the cycle going. Okay. So what are you talking about cycling?
Like through the food chain or the food web, it keeps it consistent.
Okay, the food chain and the food web, it keeps it consistent. Okay. When we studied our macromolecules and we talked about eating a meal, and you eat some food, and we related it to a set of Legos, that our digestive system takes that meal in and it breaks it down, and then we take all those Lego pieces and we use them to build other molecules that we need. Do you remember that? Okay, these organisms are exactly the same. That the cricket eats the grass, and the cricket disassembles all of the molecules in the grass and then uses it to make cricket molecules. The frog eats the cricket, and it doesn't grow cricket parts. It breaks down the cricket molecules and makes frog molecules, and so on. What happens to an individual carbon atom as it goes from the air to the grass to the cricket to the frog? Is it changing? Is the carbon atom changing, or what?
It's being broken down.
Well, you can't break the carbon down. Where does the carbon come from in the grass? When the grass makes sugars, where did that carbon come from?
Sun.
Oh, okay. What process captures carbon and turns it and puts it into a sugar? Photosynthesis. Where did those carbons come from that it puts into the sugar? Photosynthesis doesn't come from cellular respiration.
But we breathe out.
Okay, what do we breathe out?
Carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide. So there's carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The plant, for a lack of a better way of saying it, breathes in that carbon dioxide. What does it do with the carbons that it breathes in? It puts them into glucose during the process of photosynthesis. Does it change that carbon atom? No, it just puts it into a sugar. It just takes that one carbon and 5 other ones and puts it into a new molecule. It recycles, it reuses those carbons. When the cricket eats the grass, it says, ooh, yum, 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 all those glucose molecules. It takes it, it breaks all those chemical bonds, and it makes cricket molecules with those same carbon atoms, hydrogens. In fact, all the carbons, hydrogens, oxygens, nitrogens, phosphoruses, and sulfurs get reused over and over and over again. Okay? This we refer to as matter. So all of this matter gets transferred from one level to the next through these arrows, right? This is showing the transfer of matter. The energy also moves because the energy is in the chemical bonds between the elements. And the bacteria and the fungus, they get some of it too. But in the end, it's still the same carbons and hydrogens and oxygens and nitrogens that started out in our atmosphere. They don't get changed, they just get recycled and reused. And so we can say that matter is constantly being cycled because this process doesn't really have a beginning and an end. Now, maybe if there are no animals to eat that grass, those carbon atoms are going to stay in those grass plants for a long time until an animal comes along and eats them, and then those carbons move on. But they're staying in this cycle. Okay? Energy, though, doesn't cycle, does it? Is all that energy conserved?
No,
Only 10%. What happens to the rest of the energy? It gets lost as heat. At every step of the way, I'll just use an H, you're losing energy as heat. So does energy cycle like matter does? No. Energy only flows in one direction. And what you don't trap gets lost. So when the snake eats the frog, it may eat the whole frog, but after it digests what it can, it regurgitates out what it couldn't digest. Have you ever heard of like owl pellets? Yeah. In the forest, you can find these little fuzzy balls that are what the owl coughs up when it eats animals because it doesn't digest the fur and the bones. It just regurgitates it out. And you can pick up these owl pellets and assemble the skeletons of its last meal, which is kind of cool. You can do ecological studies to see what owls in certain areas are eating by reconstructing the owl pellets. So, what I want you to understand is that matter here cycles. You've heard of the water cycle, right? Wherever you start in there, it's the same water molecules just going around and around in a cycle. But energy does not cycle. It flows in one direction. I know, not one direction, but one way there. Okay? It flows one way. So energy moves through an ecosystem. Now, when we do our pyramids, we're talking about the flow of energy. In our next part of chapter 3, we're going to talk about the cycling of matter. We're going to talk about the water cycle, the carbon and oxygen cycle, and the nitrogen cycle. Because matter doesn't get used up, it doesn't get destroyed, it just gets cycled and rotated or reused and recycled from one organism to another. What type of organisms are these bacteria and fungal cells? They're decomposers. How would you categorize a decomposer? As a autotroph or a heterotroph? A heterotroph. Okay. On the back side, you had a food web. So a food chain is pretty simple, right? It's this guy is eaten by this guy, which is eaten by this guy, which is eaten by this guy. But a food web shows you all of the other organisms and all of the other relationships between those organisms, and it can get very tangled and very complicated very quickly. Which do you think would be more stable in an ecosystem, a food chain or a food web? Okay. If you say food chain, let me ask you this question. What would happen to this relationship between grass, cricket, frog, and snake if these were the only organisms in an ecosystem and maybe there was a really bad winter and all of the cricket eggs froze?
Then slowly every animal will die.
The food chain will be gross.
The food chain will collapse because the frogs lost what they were supposed to be eating, and if they lose their food source, then what's the snake going to eat? All the frogs are gone. So you start to see, the grass is going to grow like crazy. So on the back side of that worksheet, you were given a couple of potential cases. So let's talk about the first one, that there's a type of a pathogenic fungi. Pathogenic means it causes disease. Okay? And if it attacks and kills the amphibians, the frogs, well, what's going to happen to the grasshopper population? Okay, the grasshoppers are going to increase, right? What's that going to do to the grass population? Yeah, more grasshoppers, they might eat too much. What's going to happen to the snakes? Well, would you expect to possibly see a decrease in the population of snakes?
Yeah, because the snakes are eating the frogs.
Yeah, but the snakes don't only eat the frogs, right? They eat, so maybe they'll eat more birds and rabbits, but maybe there aren't enough birds and rabbits for them to survive. So you're probably going to see a decrease in the snake population. The producers, they might just be fine. Although the balance of producers might change. You might have the grass growing too much and taking over the clover and stuff like that. So I want you to make sure you do that. The last one, number 15, a lot of people left that one blank. There's a word in there that I want to make sure that you understand. Two words, actually. Sustainability. There's that word, sustain. Okay? So sustainability, do you know what to sustain means? To keep it going. Keep constant, good. Okay, to keep it stable. So if you're able to keep something stable, so if you can sustain an ecosystem, that means that things are in balance and it's healthy and it keeps going. The other one is biodiversity. Bio, we know, means life. And diverse means that things are not all the same. And so, what is more biodiverse, a food chain or a food web? A food web. And biodiversity is the key to success in ecology. You want to have lots of different organisms. Okay? So, increasing biodiversity makes ecosystems more sustainable because they can find balance. Even with little changes in weather and changes in habitat, biodiversity is a good thing. So I want to make sure that you understand that that last question down there is really you thinking beyond what's just on this worksheet, but thinking like an ecologist about what's important for an ecosystem. And the chart where you filled in 9 through 14 is applying your understanding. And these are the kinds of things that you need to be able to do when you understand the concepts. So don't forget understanding the vocabulary, but you've got to understand the big picture and the concept. Okay? So there was a lot more on that worksheet other than just, oh, I'm going to fill it in and I'm going to get it done. I hope that this helped you guys to understand the worksheet better. The other two worksheets, one was just a reading guide for the chapter. Did you have any problems on that? Okay, there's a reading guide for 3-1. So that's going to end up going into your notebook. And then the second thing was on energy flow. How did you do on that worksheet? Are you okay with that? Just throwing a little bit of math at you and that 10% law. But now today we've talked about pyramid of numbers and biomass pyramid. So now you understand pyramid of energy, a biomass pyramid, and a pyramid of numbers, right? And we're basically halfway through with, I'm not giving you any other homework this weekend because I want you to use this weekend to be time when you make sure you get all caught up. If you have anything missing, you get it done. Okay? And because I'm hoping you guys come to Talon tomorrow. All right?